Ja, vielen Dank, dass Sie alle heute hier sind. Frau Atai kennen Sie sicherlich aus dem Fernsehen, eine ausgewiesene Kennerin der Region, selbst aus dem Iran stammt, hat sie einige Jahre als Korrespondentin von Kairo aus gearbeitet, hat später einen Namen als Russland-Expertin gemacht und wie ich unlängst erfahren habe, wird sie die Büroleitung des ZDF-Büros in Kairo jetzt wieder übernehmen. Wir freuen uns sehr, dass Sie heute hier dabei zu haben. Ausgezeichnet ist Frau Atai auch mit sehr vielen Filmpreisen, oder nicht Filmpreisen, Medienpreisen, unter anderem den Scheller-Preis als Journalistin des Jahres vom Medium-Magazin und noch eine Reihe weiterer Ehrungen machen es für uns zu einer ganz besonderen Freude, Sie als Kennerin mitzuhaben, auch wenn Sie eben nicht direkt im Filmbusiness hier entstammen, aber wir haben hier zum Glück bei uns jemanden, damit wir auch direkt anschließen können an das Filmschaffen im Iran. Sie haben vielleicht Football Undercover gesehen, als vielleicht den berühmtesten Film, den Sie gemacht haben. Ein wunderbarer Beitrag und nicht nur dieser. Sie werden morgen auch noch einmal bei uns sein, um nach dem Film Cologne über die Thematik des Films bzw. des Filmschaffens auch aktivistischen Themen zu sprechen. Auch Sie herzlich willkommen. Und Maryam Mirza, ich freue mich auch, Sie hier zu haben als Journalistin und auch als Aktivistin haben wir Sie heute dabei. Ich werde jetzt auf Englisch umschwenken und wir werden das Gespräch heute auf Englisch haben. So, a warm welcome. Thank you very much for coming tonight. And I mean, it would have been lovely to also talk about the films that we just saw. I found them very, very impressive and very inspiring. Really, let's look forward to tomorrow to talk about them and then later upstairs. But let me talk a bit more about the general form of artistic expression. What would you say, what role does artistic expression and particularly films play to inspire a debate on societal issues, on political issues? Or what would you say, how relevant is it both for the audience to engage as well as for those who are producing films?
Good evening. First of all, thank you for inviting me. I think I myself and many of the audience prefer to have a female filmmaker here. But for any reason, so I'm sitting here, but I'm very happy to share my ideas. As you see in these examples, actually, the filmmakers don't know any topic. That was very clear, I think, the very first impression that we get from the movies. And I think in general, cinema plays a big role in Iranian society. It's really a question. Even if the filmmakers go on the biggest stages in the big festivals, the last example is Mustafa when he was in Cannes this year, and the conversation he had after the film in the press conference became all in the society, the social media, everywhere. Some people criticized what he said, some people defended him, and so it was really a very, very hot debate. And it shows that cinema is matter for the people. Filmmakers, I think in the last 40 years, they really, for me it's even longer, I would say from middle of the 1960s, Iranian filmmakers managed to be part of the development of the society. I think the best way to understand the modern Iranian history is through cinema. If you want to see what happened in the 1970s, before the Iranian Revolution, there are thousands of books and articles, but I think there are few movies that show us everything. And if you want to know what happened during the Iran-Iraq War, again, we have the cinema. If you want to see what happened after the war, we have the Iranian cinema. If you want to see what happened during the Green Movement, again, we have some examples. And nowadays, especially after the new media that we have, the new technology that we have, the internet, of course, the ways to express ourselves is easier. The way to communicate with the outside world is easier. It's much easier now in comparison with the time I was in Iran, like 15, 17 years ago. to present a movie outside Iran. It's much easier thanks to the technology and others. I think now we have amazing movies that can show us everything, can show us different ideas inside the country, the different debates, and also the difficulties and the problems. Again, I want to emphasize the movies that we saw is a very good example of what happens in Iran. It already gave us a very interesting and clear vision of what happens. And also the fact that the filmmakers, they really eager to get deeper inside the problem.
Thank you very much. I have a follow-up question. And you say, when you've been following it for so long, and you say that really with technology changing and more opportunities coming up through that, a lot of outrage has been generated. But it's also very closely monitored. So, there are really the eyes on particularly this names. So has it only opened more possibilities, or would you also say there are some setbacks because sometimes it's not made to be seen by a large audience? It might be risky if a larger audience has subjects, particularly the taboo ones?
No, definitely. Technology, like everything else, also helps the oppressor. There's no question of that. But again, we have the example of the movie that we just talked about, Taxi Tehran. So, the filmmaker is not allowed to make a movie. Nevertheless, he went to the streets and he made that movie, and then we saw it in the big screen. And he won the award. And unfortunately, he couldn't be part of the festival, but his crew was there, his cast and crew were there, and presented the film. So we basically, yes, the technology is also being used in the hand of the oppressor, no question. But again, the examples that we have in the last 10-15 years shows us that this cat and mouse game continues, but so far I think the artists are more clever.
Which is good, they are having had, and I also thought the films that we have been seeing are in a way just one kind of short films. I think that over the past years also a kind of citizenship journalism became more popular, and we're seeing it also from other contexts. Films made by people just with their mobile phone at a random moment have really become viral, and I think they also have an impact. And I wanted to hear your opinion on that, because I understood that you have been following that quite a bit.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here. Actually, when the Iranian cinema got to the world, it was my early teenage years. I was in high school, but when Abbas Kiarostami won the Golden Palm of the Cannes Film Festival. So back then, especially with Mr. Khatami coming to the power, so it was the time of hope, time of what is going to be represented from Iran, and people, not only people who are like, we can call them cinephiles, also like a schoolgirl like me, was so much studying into the cinema, because it was like a cinema where it became suddenly so much about red carpet, so much about being visible, becoming connected to the world. Now it's like 25 something years later, and we are on the eve of the second anniversary of the bloody suppression of the November protests of 2019. That based on the investigation of Reuters, the news agency, 1,500 people were killed. Iranian government announced it much less, like 200 something, but still 200 is a big number, especially if you know that always the statistics coming from the government, you should like go like five times more than the is kind of standing next to people about what they are expecting from cinema. Like if back then, 25 years ago, Iranians were so excited that Iranian cinema has been introduced to the world in a way. Now they are like Islamic Republic, they are looking at the cinema and expecting something from it. And they're expecting it to be, to represent the Iran they are living in, not represent the Iran that the filmmaker wished to or the propaganda regime wished to. So, in this point, then we see that how they are like, if it is about a comment from Mr. Farhadi, Asghar Farhadi, or whatever, then especially after these 2 years, they are not that much eager to know who is going to scores anymore than what is going to be shown there. So, and then it becomes then to citizen journalism, then sometimes then there is a little video of Puya Bakhtiari, who was killed in protest 2 years ago, that is announcing that, hey, people, I am at the street, don't sit inside your homes, come out, and then he's killed the same day or the day after. So this little video becomes a part of the documentary made about him. So it means that now people are making their own documentaries, participating in what is going on. And the people who are survived, who are hoping still that something more fundamentally will change, they want to see this kind of Iran in the movies. And so citizen journalism is playing a role, but I can say now we have people that there are citizen filmmakers with their just normal phones, and they are making these movies with the cost of their lives.
Yeah, this is very impressive. I mean, people are taking really big risks, but I think really, if it comes to what you mentioned, the narratives, that really diversifies also what people can see among themselves, but also what we can see outside. So, yeah, I think often it is not easy for people who are not in that situation to recognize how much risk people take and how courageous it actually is. And here I would like to ask you, I mean, you have been living in Germany now for a number of years. Do films also serve for you as a bridge back to Iran? Is it something where you say you feel that you've been followed by that? And does it help you to remain connected?
Yes and no. Yes, because it's still like when I'm watching the movies, still you are seeing part of the society. Of course, censored one, filtered one, going through so many rules to be signed and to be shown, but still it is always going on there. But I think social media now have the better role to connect me to Iran, because it is like when I am on Twitter, it feels like I am sitting in a taxi and I am in Tehran, going around Tehran, and people are talking about everything around me. And then, but for me, the real Iran is the Iran through the cinema field of more connecting me to the experience I had as a journalist, because I feel the censorship. I feel how we were using different words, the same meaning, just to bypass the censorship. So I see this kind of smart tricks in the cinema, in the movie, and I feel connected to my experience, painful actual experience as a person who writes or who creates something to be censored. But I see these tricks, and it is funny in a way, but for me, social media, especially people who are on Twitter, are more of a connection than anything else.
Thank you. I would like to have a little appetizer. I mean, it's not out. I think it's really officially only available next week. Golineh Atai has published a book called Iran, Freedom is Feminine, in a very rough translation. We have seen very strong women here, I mean, both coming down on stage as well as in the And so I was wondering whether you might connect a bit to that and say, why did you pick that title? What convinces you that freedom is feminine?
Thanks so much for having me. I think the films we just saw are a vivid example of why freedom is feminine. To have the courage to tackle these subjects. I was reminded of my interviews very much. By the way, one of the protagonists that I portray in the book, she filmed a lot of families. She filmed a lot of very tragic destinies, and she sent her films outside the country to be documented, to be part of a documentary about women's rights abuses, about human rights abuses, and she traveled throughout the country, and she tried to kind of auto-instruct herself how to get to know a camera and how to use a camera. And she's one of the heroines in the book. Why women? You were asking me. Because as you have seen, women are living the resistance every day, and they're standing on the furthest front of resistance. And I think if something, that's my personal conviction, which very much comes out in this book, that if something happens in the country, a major part of change, a major part of positive change will come through feminine force and through women fighting every day. So women are a big part of the story. They were in 1979 when their rights were restricted severely, and they will be a part of change, a part of transformation of Iran in the future. I'm very much convinced of that.
It's difficult to get used to. Anyway, thank you very much. I think it's really a very. I'm very curious to read it, and I can totally see how you developed this idea of the specific strength and courage to carry on with the continuous struggle and resistance. If I may ask, how did you were telling the stories of, I think, 9 different women who come from very different backgrounds. How were you able to find these? Is it through connections you already had, or one brought you to the other?
Yeah, through connections that I already had, but it was a very spontaneous thing, actually. I think one case developed after the other. First of all, I think the very first idea was that I have to get back to 2009 and see what happened. It was, in a way or another, it was also a turning point for me. I had different convictions in 2009, and I'm a different human being right now, and I think it happened for a lot of women, a lot of Iranian women. So I went back to Scheller because I actually had the honor of introducing her to the German public when she received the Human Rights Prize in Germany, in a small town in Germany, and I had to explain to the very astonished German public why Shiva is called a warrior against God because of Islamic jurisprudence in Iran. She was my first point of reference when I started the story. There were actually two journalists in my mind when I followed the events in 2009 for German television. It was the first, we can say it was the first social media event or social media revolt that we had in 2009. When people think of social movements that were started by social media, they always come back to 2009 and what happened in Iran. So it was a major thing to start there. And then, of course, I was thinking of 2 women who were very visible at that time, and it was, of course, one of them was Shiva, and the other one was Nasi, who came out of the country also, Ayat Najafi. 2 very different female activists. One of them doesn't believe in activism outside the country. She doesn't believe in inside Iran even. People are arguing about her importance, but still, she's a major cause for things that happened over there. And then one case after the other actually evolved. I wanted to get back to, 2009 is also the story of Mama Shahnaz, who traveled to the country with her camera and interviewed mothers and fathers who had lost their sons, who had lost their children in the aftermath of the revolt of 2009 and in the aftermath of events in 2011. And from that evolved, I witnessed this beautiful friendship in the family between Mama Shahnaz and the Da'ani family. From that, I kind of was intrigued by what has happened to Atana Da'ani, who is still in prison. I witnessed this friendship. I witnessed female solidarity and this solidarity among the families of political prisoners, which is very much kind of the impulse for this solidarity very much comes from women. And from there, I wanted to travel. I wanted to leave Tehran and kind of portray what is actually happening in the very margins of Iran. Not to have stories that only come from this 15 million metropolis, but also travel to a place which is near the Pakistani and Afghanistan border, and to see how women are living over there. It's of course through a Shiite perspective, but it's very much about the Sunni population who's living there. And also the story is a big contrast to the personality of Atana Da'ani, because I'm portraying a journalist who is not kind of a heroine, but actually she is, because she's also fighting. But she's fighting a very different fight. So one story came out of the other, and I could continue with it for an hour. Sorry.
Well, we can also continue to listen, but we will have a chance on more occasions, and you said so many things that I would like to pick two of them of the solidarity element, and I wanted to ask you, Maryam, how important is solidarity across countries? I mean, it's something where we have something called solidarity protests in a number of countries. What do you think, where do you find most solidarity maybe for the struggle for Iranian interests? And maybe it's not enough to speak only about protests and rising. I would also like to ask you, actually both of you, where do you see artistically you connect most? I mean, the red carpets, that was Cannes, or Western international film festivals, which are the countries and contexts where you find, from solidarity, maybe most inspiration artistically, or where you think that Iranian artistic productions resonate most? I'll start.
Okay, absolutely. I will touch my face. They choose their movies, that they go to scars, and they have gone through the censorship mechanisms. So, like France last year, we had this Tehran short movies festival that from last year it became so-called Oscar qualified. So that they are now choosing a short movie which can go and being seen there. So, and since last year, I have talked with the directors and I have read articles about this, that since last year there was censorship always in this festival too, but since last year it got more serious because now they are thinking what movie they are going to send in the end to the Oscar to be shown to more people outside. And after a lot of complaints and criticism, the director of the festival announced that we are not neutral, we have limits, and if we want to choose movies, we prefer the movies that they have a positive attitude, they are from families, and we are not going to, he has really named the things. And he has said that, and our Academy is fine with our decisions. So I mean, when we are talking about solidarity, it is like what we see in this direction is that countries are going to show that they are okay with what is going on inside Iran in different levels and forms, and in this case censorship, or if the world is okay with Iran is, kidnapping journalists, getting back to Iran and executing them. So I mean, there is solidarity, you cannot say there is no solidarity, but I think it is still not enough. And as we are talking now here, we are talking in the direction that we are freely leading, perhaps, but also Iran is working hard to prepare its own army outside Iran, to send them to conferences, to send them to festivals, to press conferences, to convey the message that Iran wants to, this message to be heard from as a person who is independent. So I mean, solidarity, there is solidarity, but it is absolutely not enough. And in cinema we see it, in human rights violations we see it, and if people are going to talk with the politicians about everything about political, they should not forget that this Islamic Republic has killed has killed a journalist. So then welcome, talk to her.
Thank you. Before I now pass the word to you, Ayat, I would like to mention I really hear a very nice voice, eager to ask a question. I particularly welcome that. But I would also encourage everybody else, if you have a question, my colleague Julia will now collect one of the microphones, and then you can also address her questions. So now, please.
I'm not sure if I got the question. Can you repeat it?
When I thought of the element of solidarity and the element of inspiration, and I wanted to ask, apart and outside Iran and outside the Iranian community, where do you feel that there is most interest maybe for Iranian cultural productions, or where would you say you take inspirations from? Which context, which other countries' cultural productions do you deem particularly interesting or relevant for your work, and where do you feel maybe very good exchange and solidarity among artists from different contexts?
Yeah, it's very complicated context. I think it's not easy to answer because I know we are really connected. We are really living in a very small world. For example, the impact that Abbas Kiarostami had in so many filmmakers outside Iran was amazing. So I remember in the beginning of my career, when I was struggling with my short film, people said, "Oh, you are from the country of Kiarostami." Filmmakers from really, from Chile, from Mexico, to young European filmmakers. So we had really you see a filmmaker in Iran made these movies and made this style, this aesthetic, this approach, sort of, evolved. And of course, when we go to film school, I mean, myself studied theater, but still, we had our film clubs, and you see every filmmaker. Like I remember when I was a student, I was very much impressed by Fassbinder, for example. And back then I didn't understand his language, I didn't understand the inside job that now I can understand better. But I remember that the fascination I had in, back then to Fassbinder's mise en scène. So we get we get these inspirations from every corner, and then the main question here is for me how far a movie, and it's very difficult since the age of internet, since the age of social media. Like Maryam said, you see it in the Twitter and you see a movie, a clip that just shot in Tehran in that moment. Or the Syrian civil war is a better example, because since the civil war started in Syria, every year in the big festivals we have at least one movie about the Syrian war. And the war is still going on, and the movie gives you an impression, but again, you don't know, you come out and then the news is something different, because it's already, when the movie produced and come to post-production and come to festival, it takes like 1 year at least, and then the situation is totally different. So we see a city in the movie, the next minute you are in the social media, that city, that community doesn't exist anymore, it was bombed. So what I want to say is, I have a feeling that we have to really separate the cinema as an art form to the journalism, even to the citizen journalism. And both of them have their own values, both of them have their own function, both of them have their own audience. And I can be the audience of both. But when I'm thinking about a movie, I prefer to have I don't want to be too impressed by what happens right now in Tehran on the street. I just want to have a longer term, to stay with me, like a slow food that you let it go, you let it cook, and you wait for the taste to mingle with each other, and then you see what impression, what taste it produces. And I don't think one is, opposing the other. I just want to say, they have different functions. And especially now, because we can film very easily, like with the mobiles, and immediately we can upload the internet, so immediately we can reach millions of audience. Probably, as like Maryam said, one clip from one protester who killed in Iran probably has more viewers than my documentary on, because when we go through all these platforms and who gonna enjoy, so I think the number of a clip of a protester in Tehran in one day is probably more than the entire viewers of my film. So these are two really different, let's say, rivers. And I don't believe they need to be together. I don't believe they need to meet each other. I think we have to let the art work as art, and the social media works as social media.
Thank you very much. That was a very complex answer once again, and of course I can just continue making use of my privilege to have the microphone and be here with that wonderful panel. But please, my colleague is there, and she probably sees much better who's raising their hands. I think I saw somebody who needs to ask a question.
Also, ich kann meine Frage nur auf Deutsch stellen. Darf ich das? Okay. Also, diese Kurzfilme, die ich gesehen habe, manche waren, also für mich waren nicht zu vereinbaren, dass diese Filme gemacht wurden, hier gezeigt wurden mit Namen von Filmemacher, und die haben sich Probleme angenommen wie Homosexualität oder in einem Fall diese Hinrichtung. Also wie geht das? Also wissen Sie, wie das möglich war? Dass man, also ich war ja seit 37 Jahren, seitdem ich geflüchtet bin, nicht in Iran, aber ich habe als Journalistin enge Kontakt zum Iran, und ich denke, das ist für mich irgendwie ein bisschen merkwürdig, dass das möglich ist.
I think Amin has to answer.
But he's not on the panel, so
influence, but it's just a suggestion.
Basi, did you like to answer?
No, you can answer.
I don't know the answer. I mean,
but you know one answer. Maybe that's if you need to give another one. Maybe you will give another one.
No, but I also surprised, I have to be honest, and so since I didn't produce those films and I didn't choose them, I really don't know. I think the people who chose them are also very brave, but I think tomorrow Basida will be in panel, so probably she can explain better.
Possibly tomorrow you might not be here. I mean, wir hoffen natürlich, dass Sie morgen auch zugegen sein werden, wenn Basida auf dem Panel sitzt, aber da sie hier oben ist, well, I would really like it. We're all wondering this, so maybe Basida, if you would be ready to give an answer right now.
Hello, my German is very schlecht. So if I understood well, is that there are very sensitive subjects which are treated in this film, and how it's possible to make them in Iran?
Why people, or I translate in Persian, do you want to repeat it in Persian yourself, Nancy?
What was the question?
The question was that they appear with their names, you know, and
how can they be publicly presented?
How they can make this film okay, have their names.
And tackle these taboo subjects, how does it go together?
It's difficult to answer. Actually, we learn since childhood how to play with limits. We are very strong in poetry, symbolism, and we pass everything through. We learn to not show maybe sexuality directly, but suggest it somehow. And in this film, in Origami, you see it very well actually. The teacher is touching the hair without going more further, and all other films also. So it's part of our culture, I would say. And it doesn't bother anyone. We make these films and we show them in Iran, and they participate in festivals in Iran also.
Thank you very much. I think that is part of an answer, but I think that we to know how to frame things to be understood and then not be too offensive, not crossing the final red line, not to be able to be shown. I find it quite hard. Would you say that's something that people acquire over the years of watching and studying? And how do you learn about these deadlines? And are the deadlines fixed? I mean, things are changing politically. Do you feel that deadlines are changing? And if so, are they getting blurred and it becomes more difficult? Or is it always very clear what you can do and what you can't? Would you like to start?
I don't limit my answer to the cinema, although I have still the same question, because also we live through the censorship and we learn how to express ourselves without really pressing the button so much. But still, there were some signals in these movies, like bringing period with the Quran. You see the Quran sentences there, with the period, blood, and also perhaps not the woman at the street, which we have lived, like Iranian women in the street. They are living exactly the same. Like you cannot walk freely without being harassed inside at the street in Iran. So, but some topics like the period or the homosexuality, I found them quite provoking for the system too. So I have the same question, but going back to my own experience when I was still working as a journalist inside the country. We have different levels of censorship. It starts with yourself. So it's like you do a kind of censorship without being told, based on what you have, in your mind or what you have learned. So as a journalist, when you start, like for example, very, very simple words like you avoid naming the regime, like you don't say Hukumat, you say Hakimiyat. So the difference is so little, but it means a lot when you are writing in Persian for the newspapers. And then you know the things that you shouldn't really pass these lines. And then you go to the newsroom, and then your editor and others, then they take their pen and start editing your article. They go through this article as much as they can really change things. So, for example, in Iran, and it is not all political, but when you are a woman, it is political too, still. For example, as a woman, when you are talking about the breast cancer, in Farsi it is pestan, but you don't say pestan because it is provoking. It is supposed provoking. So you say chest cancer. You say saratan al-sineh instead of saratan al-pestan, because then it is more perhaps like far from being feminine, which is quite provoking for the guys. And so then there are things that you learn through your job, because the editor is there quite professional, but it's supposed to be there, but it's not supposed to be there. And then the censorship comes also about from the foundations that they are there, the governmental foundation, that they send statements to the newsrooms. That, for example, today you are not going to write about this topic or that topic. You are not supposed to cover this topic at all. And so you have always this person calling you or writing to the newspaper, and then the chief editor would come out from his room and say, okay, don't write about this, or you shouldn't do this or that. And the last censorship is your magazine or your newspaper is shut down. So we learn things, but still there is always something left that we haven't learned. That's why we are shut down. That's why we learned, and afterward we learned how to be nomad as a journalist, to go after 6 months working in this newspaper, then you take your things to go to the next newspaper, and then it was for the best days of journalism in Iran. Now, journalists in Iran are experiencing that they cannot be journalists anymore. It is not like being a nomad journalist. They cannot be a journalist. They have gone to sectors like working as public relation officers or something, but they cannot. First, there is not much of a variety of newspapers that they work in. Secondly, the money is not enough, and we know that the situation, economic situation is that hard that you cannot survive if you want just rely on being a journalist, even considering our censorship and everything.
Three observations. I've been following the work of this amazing Cologne crew for some years now, and what you have seen right now is just a small sample of documentary films which are awesome and a kind of transgressing limits. I mean, I've seen so many examples of that. It's just amazing. I mean, playing with limits, yes, but it's. I think it also has to do with the fact that probably short films are suffering less censorship than the longer formats, but probably we will talk about it also later on tomorrow. That's the first observation. The second one is, when I approached the protagonists of my book, I was taken aback by their frankness, which was a little bit like overwhelming, like ooh, too many feelings. They were kind of describing things that I wouldn't have expected them, being in Iran, to describe so openly. And at one point I even noticed that my German editor was telling me, are you sure you should have that in your book? Because it was about the period. And one of my protagonists was telling me that every time she visited her sister in prison, she would have so much stress that her trousers would be red for blood. And I'm describing the scene in the book, and my German editor was feeling uneasy with it. And that was surprising to me. Okay, an Iranian woman is talking about her period so openly, and the German editor is not really easy with that. One of the heroines was describing that she was in prison. She wanted to wash herself to get herself ready for prayer, and she had to do a special ritual because of her period, and they wouldn't let her, which was at a very young age of 18, for her the first moment when she was thinking, okay, maybe this is wrong. I mean, they're supposed to, adhere to these rules, to the religious rules, and they don't adhere. They don't allow me to do this ritual washing because of my period. This is really strange. So yeah, it's here. It's explained by these women. And a last observation, I also noticed. I grew up in Germany, but with every interview, especially with the interviews that took place in Iran, I noticed how conservative I was brought up here in Germany, and how frankly women in Iran can talk about their sexual problems, their period, and transgressing limits. So, yeah, it all makes sense.
Thank you very much. Very inspiring and very interesting answers. It's just that I'm getting some notes here from people who did the program and are trying to tell me, I think, that we should move to the cafe to continue the conversation, because actually there will be another screening happening here. And so I know we started with a little bit of delay. We also expanded it a bit. So please, we are guests upstairs with some